Hey everyone, welcome to the podcast. I'm Devon Dickinson, and today we're changing the format up with the Whiteboard Entrepreneur Podcast. And we realized over the years that before we'd start filming, we've had producers, Colin, Jesse, Lauren, have always been behind the scenes on this podcast. But before we would actually do the podcast, we would talk for an hour and a half. And every time we're like, golly, why didn't we film that? Because it was super raw, very transparent, some humor. And we just felt like we really want to provide something that's authentic. And this podcast, the whole goal why I started it is to kind of remove the behind the curtain feel of what it's like to be an entrepreneur. And so many times I think there's this facade and this image of what being an entrepreneur, a leader, business person is. And people don't tell you the real stuff, right? They don't tell you the challenges, the victories, the failures. It just focuses on, the polished, especially with social media, right? Like, hey, here's how perfect I am. Here's how the amazing decisions I made to become a billionaire, right? Instead of like, man, these are the failures. These are the everyday challenges that we face in life. And so we thought in order to really take the podcast to the next level, that we wanted to go to an interview style. And so Lauren today is going to interview me. Yep. And we got Colin behind the scene of the camera. We got Jesse, everybody's producers. I don't know. Do you guys have titles? What are your titles?
Producers.
Producers.
You could say I drew the short straw that I get to be on camera. No.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, we're super excited about this. And Lauren, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, no, Devon, I'm actually really excited to be doing this with you. Obviously, as you mentioned, we've been doing it for a while behind the scenes. I love every conversation we have, hearing your story, digging in, and just like learning so much about business and entrepreneurship. So I am excited to be in front of you, talking this through, and being able to share it with everybody.
Awesome, great. Let's
Ready?
get started. Let's do it.
Okay. So I saw this article and immediately thought I have to bring it up to you, and I got to pick your brain on this. So nearly half of Americans have considered starting a business, and here's what's stopping them, and it goes into details. So what the article talks about is that 42% of Americans have considered starting a business. This is the reasons people don't start a business, and I'll give you the percentages.
Hold on. How many?
42% of Americans.
So almost half.
Yeah, almost half of Americans have thought about starting a business. 12% don't because they already own a business. 13% don't because there's not enough time. 16% have no interest in starting a business. 17% don't know what type of business they'd start. And then the overwhelming majority don't, and that would be actually 44% don't have enough money to start a business, and that's what stops them. So I wanted to get your thoughts on, first off, what are your thoughts on even those percentages and what stops people?
Yeah, there's a few things that kind of stuck out to me. The first thing that stuck out was the number of people that have this dream of being a business person, but they don't know what business to start. The problem is I think that you go on and you watch like Shark Tank, and on this podcast you're going to hear a lot of me say some negative stuff about Shark Tank. It's not the people, it's not anything like that, but I think it provides just this unrealistic expectation of what it's like to be a business person. Because what happens is with Shark Tank, they're all taking unique ideas on the show because people want to see something unique, and that's what sells, and that's why people are going to watch the show. And then the process, we'll talk about the process at another time, but we get this idea that if you're going to start a business, you have to have a unique idea or product. And people often think about being an entrepreneur more of being an inventor. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so they're like, well, I've never come up with a unique idea. I've never invented anything. And so they start to get paralyzed with that idea. And being an entrepreneur is basically running a business, creating a business and running it, right? And so there's this kind of crazy misconception. I've talked about this before, but like Jeff Bezos did not come up with some crazy new idea. He sold used books. Mm-hmm. Like Amazon was a used bookstore, right? Like we forget about that. Yeah. It was just a used bookstore. And then he evolved it and grew it and all of that. But like, could I have come up with an idea for used books? Yeah. But like people think that's not unique. Like I'm not an entrepreneur because everybody else already sells used books. So how could I sell used books and be any different, right? Mm-hmm. Or like people often disregard franchises, right? And so like if you have this heart and you have this desire to be an entrepreneur, like first off, get it out of your mind that you have to come up with some crazy new idea. Like just start a business. A business could be Crumble Cookie. Like I'm looking out the window right here and there's like Crumble Cookie, you know, you can buy a franchise and then run that business. One of the most brilliant entrepreneurs I ever knew owned several hundred franchises. When I knew him over the course of years, I think he had said it was over 1,000 different franchises that he owned, bought, and flipped, right? And he was a brilliant entrepreneur. He never had an original idea in his life.
Yeah.
But he was a great business person, a really great entrepreneur, right? And so, you know, one of the things that this podcast is designed to do is to change the way people think about entrepreneurialism. And so, like, I think even in that perspective, like, what's to say, like, you couldn't go down and buy a Little Caesars tomorrow, you know?
Jeff Bezos has just as much in common as the guy who owns Danny's Car Wash, you know,
Right.
the franchise. They have the same skill set to an extent, obviously on very different levels and very different, you know, businesses, but that same initial skill set, starting a business and running a business, right?
Yeah, and the joys of seeing something grow, seeing your baby kind of evolve and grow and seeing what you can do with it. And that's why people get into business or being an entrepreneur anyways, is because they want to grow something. They want to have something that's like, there's something that they can sink their teeth into. Like you said, it is like your baby, and that's why entrepreneurs get very passionate. And so, just because you didn't birth the idea that's never been done before, doesn't mean that you're not an entrepreneur. So, you know, I would start like just with that statistic as a whole is sad to me, because I think if people just slightly change their perspective. I have a friend that I was encouraging to do, this gun range that was like, he didn't start, right? But it was for sale. And I was like, dude, I think you should go buy this gun range.
Yeah.
Like, and he's like, well, you know, I want it to be like mine. And I'm like, it will be yours. You just paid for it, right? Like, now go make it better, right? And the great thing is it's already started, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I'm like, it's something you could be passionate about. Like, it's something you could get super excited. He loved the idea of it, you know, but it's like, I think we think that we have to have the idea. It has to be original. It has to be a new product. You know, I tell the story one time, if you got $50 in a pickup truck, go buy a used lawnmower, and next thing you know, you're an entrepreneur. Now, people would say, no, you're a landscaper. If it's your business, you're an entrepreneur. It's what you do with that.
Yeah.
You know, one of the when I first got into business, I was working as a sales rep, and I met this plumber. And it's funny because people are like, never thought of him as an entrepreneur. He sold his plumbing business for this was in, I want to say probably 1998, and I think he sold his plumbing business for around $20 million. Wow. He ain't a plumber.
Yeah.
He's an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So that statistics makes me sad. And then I think where you're going is the financial piece.
Before we dig into that, though, I did actually, like, how did you have points in your life where you stopped and started where you're like, I have this idea, I'm going to run with it, and then you pulled back? Or, you know, how many iterations of that did you go before you made that first leap?
Yeah. So for me, I was like, I had this desire ever since I was a little kid to own a business, right? And so, you know, when I was in 16 years old, or I'm sorry, when I was like 12 years old, I was mowing lawns, right? And then there's something pretty special about someone literally handing you money directly rather than it coming from a paycheck.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Because I also worked at McDonald's too, and I'm not disregarding that. Some of the greatest lessons I ever learned in business, I learned from McDonald's.
Yeah.
And I'm not being facetious here.
Yeah.
I'm talking about, like, it was great lessons. It was like, when I was at McDonald's, I know we're a little off track here, but that's the point of these. But I was at McDonald's, and I was at my first job, and I, you know, took the order and gave them their change and handed them their cheeseburger. And then I was standing there, and the manager looked at me and said, what are you doing? I said, waiting for the next customer. And he looked at me and said, clean something. And I was like, okay. And then I got the concept that, like, wait, I'm here just because there's not a customer doesn't mean there's not work to do, right? And so, like, if you're going to be somewhere, work, right? Get it done. And so, like, there's just, incredible lessons for working for somebody. So I don't ever want to disregard working for people, because I wasn't just McDonald's, but I worked for many, many companies, and every single company I learned and I grew and I got great habits and I learned what I liked. I learned what I didn't like. I was challenged. So it's not that I'm against working for someone, because I think it's amazing lessons, opportunities, but I had this entrepreneurial spirit that I want to do it on my own. So, at 17 or 16, I started painting curbs, right? And it was great money. It was awesome. And it was nothing like getting a door slammed in your face, right? Like knocking on a door saying, hey, would you like to get your curb painted? And then someone slams the door in your face. Yeah. And also the discipline of having to, like, me, myself, like, it's the summer, right? You're a high school kid or a college kid, and you're like, man, I could go to a concert, I could go to the beach. No one's telling me where I need to be. Yeah. But as an entrepreneur, I knew that if I didn't work, there was no money, right? Like, no one told me I had to work, right? So, like, the discipline that I had to have to be able to go and do that when I had all other kinds of options. So it's like, so I started painting curbs, and I had this desire all along the way to start a company. And when I was in college, I looked, what about buying a laundromat. Laundromat, yeah. Okay. Laundromats. And then I started reading stuff on real estate. And, we didn't have podcasts back then, but I'd buy, like, the books on real estate and how to invest in real estate. And I was just fascinated with this, and I was trying different opportunities. In college, we actually started a little newspaper, right? And it was all failures, because we didn't know what to do. We didn't know how to price stuff, right? But every single time, it just birthed more and more inside of me that I wanted to have a business and a company. But same thing, I never had a good idea. Like,
you weren't doing flashy stuff, painting curbs and laundromats. I didn't come up with, like, I never came up with Google and a search engine, right? Like, I was never an engineer. I didn't have that kind of a mind. I wasn't an inventor type, right? So I knew I just had to find something that I could do really well, replicate it and grow it, because I knew I could probably run a business, but I kind of had to get out of my own mind that, that I had to come up with an idea that had never been done before. Yeah. So now let's go. So obviously the first couple of things that stop people are all kind of mental things. They don't have the business idea or they don't have the interest. But I did want to talk about not having enough money, because that is a very real, tangible issue that people have when it comes to starting a business. And again, 44% of people, that's what stops them. So I wanted to get your thoughts on what would you tell somebody who has a great idea? You've heard their idea and you're like, they've got it, but they don't have enough money to start it. What would you tell them to do?
So I can tell you what I've done, and the way that I did it is, it's called bootstrapping. And then there's, another way, and that's where, people get investors, right? Okay. And for me, bootstrapping was the way to go. And almost every time I recommend to people that, listen, you need to bootstrap your company. And right now, probably when you listen to this podcast, you're not going to be super excited about what I have to say, to be totally honest, right? Okay. Like, I'm prepping everyone, because I think bootstrapping is very difficult. And in people's mind, this is why, 41% don't do it. But I think it's the right way to do it.
Okay, I got to ask, what is bootstrapping?
Okay, yeah. So I should probably start there, right?
Yeah.
So bootstrapping is basically you and the company finance itself, right? So basically you're taking money out of your own funds, out of your own bank account, me, myself, and I. Okay. And you're using that to start the company. So for me, I started my very first company. I had $5,000 and a credit card. And I think that credit card was like a $3,000 line of credit, and my wife had a job. Okay. I had a job, but I quit my job to start the company. So my wife had a paycheck. We had $5,000 in savings and a credit card. And that's how we started the company. And if we didn't have money to finance it, we didn't do it. Yeah. Like, if I didn't have money to, hire a person, I didn't do it, right? Like, if I didn't have money to do marketing, I didn't do it. Like, And so basically the business self-funds.
Okay.
So that's kind of what bootstrapping is. The alternative is where you go and you raise a bunch of money and you sell, you either get loans or you're basically giving up equity in your company and you're raising money and using that as kind of like your slush fund to run the company. And we'll talk about a little bit later why I think that's so dangerous.
Okay.
Because I think it's so dangerous and people don't know what they're doing, and I rarely see that work out. And I think most people that are listening to podcasts right now, let's be honest, they probably want to hear about that because that's what they want to do. Because what happens is you're leaving. I told you I left my job.
Yeah.
I was doing great at my job. Like my parents were not happy with me when I left.
Yeah.
And it was uncomfortable for my wife and I, right? Like this, like, let's be real. Like I want to make it very real here. So I had a 3-month-old. So our very first baby. And my wife, she wasn't killing it. She worked in the schools. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So, and we had a mortgage payment and we sat down ahead of time and realized that we were going to be bootstrapping this company.
So it was like a mutual decision that you guys talked through and figured and decided this was what was best for.
We really did. And my wife, Cindy, like she has always been supportive of me. In my failures, because I'm about to tell you our success, right? And you say, well, of course she's going to be supportive, right?
Yeah.
But like, no, she's supportive of me in my failures along the way. She was never like money motivated. She just wanted me to be happy.
Yeah.
She wanted us, to have time for the family. But she knew we were going to be sacrificing time. Like we sat down and we kind of had like a 10-year plan for our life. My wife was very frugal. I was very frugal. And, the house I mentioned, the mortgage or whatever, like we never had furniture that was new. Like up until, maybe 8-10 years ago, I don't think I ever even bought new furniture.
Really?
We'd get stuff from Goodwill.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and our dishes, like, none of them match, right? Like,
yeah.
Actually, to this day, if you go to our house, my favorite cup is our Harkins cup,
Yeah.
Bring out the fine china.
Yeah.
Here's our Harkins cup. So, we had a frugal mindset. We were in it together. We knew what we were embarking on because I spent time on our business plan, and I knew that it was going to take a while to kind of cash flow. And I knew if we weren't cash flowing, I wasn't going to be able to take a paycheck. So we basically got our expenses down to the point that we could live off of her salary as working in the schools. And so we would share a car. We shared like one pickup truck. It was like a little Ford Ranger stick,
Yeah.
And we had a baby. We knew what our budget was. We had a plan, and we went for it. And so the $5,000 and the credit card, that was it. That was all that we had to start. So we started the company, and it was 2 years before I took a paycheck. And so if anything, we would sometimes even have to dip in to the money that she was making and loan it to the company and then give it back.
Okay.
And so that money, that $5,000, that credit card, that's what we used to pay all of the bills of the company, to fund the company. But what was really great about it is it never let us get ahead of our skis. We knew, we had a very small budget. We knew that's what I had to work with, and that was it. So my wife would do our books. She would help me on the weekends. I would work all week on, and I mean, literally just work all week. Like, I didn't even know how many hours, just work.
Yeah.
Right.
How'd you stay disciplined during that time? Because I got to imagine that's where a lot of people, they even, starting off bootstrapping, have the right mentality or are gung ho, and then 18 months hit and you're like, dang, we want to take that vacation, or we want to, buy ourselves this. What did you guys do to stay disciplined?
Well, that's kind of the beauty of bootstrapping. It doesn't let you be undisciplined. Hey, we want to take a vacation. Oh, crap, the credit card's maxed out, right?
Yeah.
Well, we'll dip into our savings. What savings, right? Like,
Yeah.
That's what it did. That's what bootstrapping did, is it never let us be undisciplined.
Okay.
Because we couldn't. We didn't have the money. Like the only option I had was to succeed. You know, so you hear the story about like the missionaries that go and they end up in wherever, you know, whatever island or whatever, and they burn the boats.
Yeah.
That's what this did for us, is burn the boats. I had no option but to succeed.
Okay.
And that's what the difference is. If you raise money, you kind of can be undisciplined, right? Like, like I'm going to tell you now, like other companies that I've had since then, I haven't had to bootstrap because I'm the investor. And so I have, you know, I can throw good money at a problem, right? And guess what? I just burn good money.
Yeah.
When you bootstrap it, it doesn't let you do that, right? Like you literally have to have every dollar accounted for, and if that dollar that you're investing is not turning into $5, like you stop investing it real quick.
Yeah.
You know, and so there's this discipline. So it's funny you asked about the vacation. This is what happens. So people that listen to this podcast right now, if you're still listening, because probably people turned me off already, right? Because I do not want to hear this. But what people are hoping to hear is that you had a job, and let's say you have a job and you make $80,000 a year. What they want to do is they want to start a company and make at least $80,000 a year or more when they start the company. So when they raise this money, they put their salary in there as part of what the money they're raising. Yeah. Bootstrapping doesn't like you to do that. Like, because who's going to pay the salary? Me, myself, and I. I'm going to pay me, myself, and I, right? It doesn't work. So people go and say, oh, I need $500,000 to start my company. What do you need that $500,000 for? Oh, well, because I have to make at least $80,000 a year, and I need this office on the 4th floor, you know, with the view.
Yeah.
And
all new furniture for it, or the look before you've got the actual business.
Absolutely,
there.
right?
Okay.
And then I have to hire 3 people to do what? To do your job?
Yeah.
No, you're going to do your books.
Yeah.
Like you're going to do your books. Like you're going to do your collections. You're going to answer the phone. You're going to take out the garbage. You're going to be your salesperson. You're going to be your everything. Like you're going to do everything in the beginning. And so again, bootstrapping, brutal. Like I joke about this, but it's not a joke. If you're watching this podcast, you're going to see I'm bald as a cue ball. But well, actually it's by choice, right? Because I shave, right? Actually, if I didn't shave, I'd have a U-Hawk. Nobody likes that look. Yeah. But anyway, like those first 2 years, Lauren, I'm going to paint the picture for you. I would, because I had to work out of town, and that's another story for another time, but I would stay in this $40 a night hotel, and that's because that's all I could afford. And you can imagine what a $40 a night hotel is like. Yeah. And sometimes I would just sleep in the cab of my truck because I'd saved the $40. And during that time, that 2 years, it was so stressful and so difficult, and I worked so long and so hard that I used to have very thick hair, like yours. It was your color. It was super thick. And people actually made comments to me like, Devon, you're lucky you're never going to go bald. People would tell me that. Like, and during that time, I remember washing my hair and looking down at my hands, and it just falling out in clumps. Yeah. And so it was very difficult, very stressful 2 years, right? And it's tough. And again, that's why we do this podcast. It's not that you can't do it. You can do it. And I'm not going to tell you I was miserable. I wasn't getting whipped. Yeah. I was doing what I knew I was called to do. So I was excited. I was working hard. Yeah. But it took everything out of me. My wife had to support me in it. But by the end of that 2 years, when we first started taking our paycheck, then it's like we kind of cleared that first hurdle. And within, I don't know, maybe 6 months after that, I was making enough money that my wife could actually quit her job. And then, years down the road, like it's obviously paid unbelievable returns.
How did you know it was time to start taking a paycheck?
Again, bootstrapping lets you know, right? Because the great thing about bootstrapping is you don't even have to be you don't have to be a financial guru, right? On the other side, if someone hands you $500,000, like you need to be very financially shrewd because, you know, cash flow, money coming in, money going out, billing, invoicing, you have to know your books very, very well, right? And you're paying salaries, and then you got deferred revenue, and you've got like all kinds of things that can literally sink you in a heartbeat, right? With bootstrapping, you don't necessarily even have to be financially sound. I don't recommend you run your business this way, but at the end of the month, you kind of know how much money you got, right? Is it plus or is it minus, right? And so for me, how I knew I could finally start taking a paycheck was all our bills were paid, not just for that month, but we had like 3 months in advance. And again, this is not a sophisticated form of doing business. Later on, I'm going to tell you kind of how I want you guys to do it. But for me, once I knew all my bills were paid and I had like 2 or 3 months in the bank, I was like, I can start taking a paycheck. And what I didn't do was I didn't take the excess cash. I did not do that. What I did is start very slow and said, you know what? I'm going to start paying myself $2,000 a month. Okay. And, you know, I did that for like 3 or 4 months. And I'm like, okay. And I still saw where our bank account was. Again, I'm not suggesting you do this. You have to have way more sophisticated financials than I'm explaining right now. But again, bootstrapping doesn't let you get in over your head. After that, I was like, you know what? I think I can go to like $6,000 a month, right? And then it was like $10,000 a month. And then it was, you know, kind of continued on from that. And then after about a year, I was able to literally get my books in order. I had, you know, 12, 24, 36 months behind me. I had history. I started to understand financials better. I started to understand my P&L. I knew what all my expenses were. I knew what my margins were. And then what I did is I just put myself as basically an employee of the company. And I paid myself a salary. And then at the end of the year, after we would do all of our books, not just look at our bank account, we'd do all of our books, we'd figure out what the profit was. And I would take like whatever, let's say the profit was $10. It was more than $10, but let's say it was $10. I would take $5, right? I would take half of that. And so that's kind of how I grew it in the beginning. And that's, again, the great thing about bootstrapping is it doesn't let you get ahead of your skis, and it kind of teaches you by trial and error. Like if you can imagine, like, how do people learn to manage their personal finances, right? Well, they get out of school, you know, maybe at some point, maybe your kid, as a parent, you make your child make the car payment and the insurance, and then they start having to make the cell phone payment and stuff. And so that's kind of how we train people to start managing their personal finances. And bootstrapping is similar from an entrepreneurial perspective, right? But imagine this. What would happen if you gave your kids $100,000 and sent them out of the house? They'd probably end up a crackhead.
They'd have 2 million Robux.
Exactly.
What both my kids would do.
Right.
They'd buy just Roblox bucks or whatever they're called.
It would be terrible. Like, it'd be a disaster. But that's what we do as an entrepreneurs, right? We think, oh, I'm going to go raise all this money. And that's like the same thing as getting like, you know, a 20-year-old a huge paycheck or a huge lump sum of money and say, go run your life, right? And that's what we do as entrepreneurs. But so there's so many issues with like raising money to start your company. I think bootstrapping is a safe way to go. And the sad thing is, when I sit down with people, and you know, this is kind of like normally like an hour to 2 hour long session, you know, I make them do their business plan, and then from their business plan, I say, great. Let's bootstrap this. And what they think they're going to hear from me is, hey, I just did my business plan. Here's $500,000, right? And I'm like, it's not going to help you. And so that's where people get discouraged, and then they leave and they don't become entrepreneurs. So I'm hoping that people, as they listen to this, get a realistic perspective, but are still encouraged, because you can do this. Those first 2 years, I made it sound really rough, right? I know no one wants to go bald, but I wasn't miserable during that time. I was just focused and working hard, and some of the best memories of my life are from that time. You know,
you do it all again.
Our marriage is closer than ever. I would do it all over again. It would be difficult, you know, but worth it.
Now looking back on that, how do you think, either to yourself or just in general, bootstrapping makes you a better business leader or business owner.
Yeah, well, you learn to understand cash flow. Mm-hmm. People don't understand cash flow. And right now, everyone thinks, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I understand cash flow. I'm like, no, all you do at the end of the month, you look at your bank account, see if it's plus or minus. That's not cash flow, right? Bootstrapping teaches you cash flow. There was things in business that like I'd heard in the past that didn't really resonate until I started a business. Like I heard someone say something like, the first lesson is you have to manage your ARs. And I'm like, I don't even know what that means, right? And it means manage your accounts receivable. And I'm like, what do you mean? You send someone a bill, they pay it. Yeah. That's it, right? Like it's that simple. Yeah. And then I got into business, right? And I realized, wait, managing ARs is not easy, right? And so bootstrapping helps with that, right? Mm-hmm. It also, the great thing about bootstrapping is it makes you appreciate a dollar. Mm-hmm. You know, going back to kind of the high school analogy here, I learned the value of a dollar when I was working at McDonald's. We had talked about McDonald's earlier. I had my first paycheck was $70 from McDonald's. I made $3.16 an hour. So do the math on how many hours I had to work. It was quite a bit, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And the only time I could work at McDonald's was because I played sports, was I had to wake up and open on like Saturday and Sunday mornings. Mm-hmm. So I had to be at McDonald's at 4 a.m. in Ohio. It's February, it's cold and miserable, and I had to be there at 4 a.m. And so like, I wasn't happy. This was not my happy job, right? Mm-hmm. But I was so excited to get a check. Yeah. So I got that $70, went down to the mall like most people did in the 80s, right? Yeah, yeah. And I found this Adidas hat. I loved this hat. And I was standing in line at Foot Locker. Uh-huh. And at the time, this is like 1987 or 8, whatever. And I remember standing there, it was like $18. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, $18? Well, I have $70. Yeah, right? Yeah. And then I was like, wait a second. After taxes, I think it came out to like $50, right? And, and then I'm like, wait a second. If I buy this hat, this means I have to work 1, 2, 3. What is that? 6 hours, 7 hours? I had to work an entire freaking shift
to get it.
Which meant in my head, I'm like, that means that I would have to wake up at 4 a.m., drive to McDonald's, work an entire shift just so I have this hat. That hat was back on the shelf in like a minute, right? Yeah. So that's how I learned the value of a dollar as a teenager, right? As an adult, as an entrepreneur, I learned the value of a dollar by bootstrapping, right? Because I was like, people are like, well, why don't you hire a manager? I'm like, because a manager costs this much money right now, and I want to take a paycheck. Yeah, yeah. I'm not going to hire a manager because I'm not even taking a paycheck yet, right? So it's like, I learned the value of a dollar, right? And so there's so many lessons that are learned. Like people are like, well, like, because what's funny is I hire people all the time that have come from corporate America and huge budgets and stuff. And they're like, oh, well, we'll just hire, I'll just send this, this happened the other day. Oh, we'll just send this contract over to the attorney to review. And I'm like, yeah, and that just cost me $5,000. Yeah, yeah. Or you can sit on Saturday morning, you're a CEO, you can open that contract and you can read the entire freaking contract. You can redline it yourself and you're not going to cost us $5,000. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And so that's what bootstrapping does, right? Like it makes you understand the value of a dollar, right? And by the way, I'm a better business person because I know how to do contracts. Yeah, yeah. I'm probably better than most attorneys I know, right, at contracts. And so bootstrapping helps you do these things that like you would have never done before. And it's like I said, like a lot of times the best workers are the people that kind of had to start from nothing. And that's the best business people are the ones that have kind of gone through the school of hard knocks and all that.
Yeah, it's almost so you hear about like Enterprise Rent-A-Car or In-N-Out have these great management trainee programs. And the basis of those programs is they do every single thing in that business. If you're Enterprise, you're washing the cars, you're picking people up, you're making the phone calls, or picking up the phones. In-N-Out, I have I have a niece and 2 nephews who have all worked at In-N-Out. That's where their first job was. And they started off like just handing the sodas at the window. And then they graduate to fries. Then they graduate to cutting tomatoes, all this stuff. But they've done every single thing. And that's almost just a different, that's bootstrapping right there, just in a different version, right?
Yeah. Now, Lauren, you don't know this about me, so this is interesting that you said this. But when I told you I left corporate America, I had actually been at Enterprise.
Oh,
yeah.
That's where I started.
Yeah.
I was really? Yeah.
Oh. The big E, right?
Yeah. That's where I started too, and I loved it. And I learned the most about business. That was a great first job out of school. So.
It was one of the best jobs I ever got out of school, right? And it taught me how to be a business person, how to care for every aspect of the company.
Yeah. I was in New York, so I'm shoveling snow, getting cars out, driving in ice, you know, and it was like, learned it. So
yeah, very similar, right? It's just kind of like you're going to learn it and you're going to learn it the hard way, but it's the right way.
Yeah.
And again, you almost end up spoiled if the money, like you just go and raise money.
Yeah.
And there's so many problems with that, right? Like there's this scenario. So right now, one of my companies is in the tech space, and so we have different types of companies, but this company is in the tech space, and that company has lots of tech partners. Okay, so a lot of people in tech do exactly what I said, where they have this idea, and so they raise all this money, and I'm not exaggerating, Lauren, when I tell you probably close to about once a month. I'll get an opportunity, you know, because people know that we acquire companies and buy and sell stuff. And so I get pitched a lot of different companies. And about once a month, I will see a tech company that literally I can basically buy. And I'm not exaggerating here, but I can more or less buy it for free, right? Because what happens is somebody went and said, hey, all that I need is $200,000, right? And I have this great technology. And maybe they do. Like I've seen some super cool tech. I have this great technology, but if I had $200,000 and I'll give you 20% of my company, or I'll give you 50% of my company, or I'll give you 10% of my company. But if you give me $200,000, I'm going to create this company and then we're going to go and we're going to make millions. And right. And Shark Tank has created this culture.
Yeah.
Where everyone fancies themselves angel investors, right? So these people are like, oh yeah, you know what? Sure, I'll tap into my 401k. I'll pull money out of my house. I'll take my savings and I'll invest with you, nephew, because geez, you seem like a tech nerd, genius, right? Like they don't know anything about investing. Or even if you do know about investing, like they're just not making wise investments, right? So these people, so what happens in these companies is the person says, I need $200,000. And this is a very real life example. And then guess what? A year later, oh my gosh, we're out of money. Why are they out of money? Number one, because they're probably paying themselves a salary, which they shouldn't be. Yeah. Right? Number two, they're paying other people to do stuff that they should be doing. Maybe it all had to be, maybe every penny was perfectly spent, but $200,000 doesn't get you there. Yeah. Right. Especially in tech. Right. So they go back to the same people and they're like, you're going to lose everything because I'm about to go out of business unless we raise another $200,000. But don't worry. Now I'm going to give you 20% or 40% of the company. Right. Okay. Well, the company's worth crap. Yeah. Like, the business model never made sense in the first place. Maybe it even did, right? But there's no revenue coming against it. There's nothing worth there. Maybe actually here's where it even gets dangerous. Maybe it is starting to work. Another year goes down. You won't believe it. We have all these companies that are so interested in us. Look, we already have 10 customers. By this time next year, we could have 200 customers. We just need another 200,000. So this is a real example, right? So there's a company right now that from friends and family raised about $700,000. Right now, if I called them up, I think I could, within 1 week, negotiate out that they basically gave me the company for free. And all I would have to do is any money that we made on that company, I'd pay back the investors. But I'm not going to buy it. Even though I could have that company for free, I'm not interested. And I think that company will probably not make it to Christmas. Really? And it's sad. Do you feel people are like, oh, that's such a sad story for the entrepreneur? No, it's not a sad story for the entrepreneur. The entrepreneur's been taking a paycheck the whole time. It's a sad story for the people that put the freaking money in. Yeah. Right? Like that's their house, right? And like I said, it's normally friends and family. Everyone thinks like they watch Shark Tank and they get these wrong ideas, right? And then they see these things like, well, in Silicon Valley, they're making millions and doing this, that, and the other. Well, I don't know the exact statistics on it. We should look it up and talk about this one time. But I believe that VC is less than 10%. And that's real VC money. I'm not talking about aunts and uncles. Yeah. I'm talking about real VC investors are like less than 10% of what they invest in wins. Yeah. The 8% or whatever that does wins big, but these people are smart investors.
Yeah. And that makes me think too, because even actually you said something on Shark Tank, a lot of sometimes the investors will say, I'm interested, but I don't know anything about that industry and I'm going to pass, which going back to your example of like neighbors, aunts, uncles, like, or even just in investment, they're like, don't invest in anything you don't know about. Yeah. But when you're giving, loaning money to a son, a friend, you're investing in something that you know nothing about. It's that same idea.
It's such a slippery slope. One of my rules, because I get pitched a lot, one of my rules is unless I know it, right? Like I won't do it. And for me personally, unless I can contribute in some fashion, I won't do it because I want to bring more than money, right? Like if you're just looking for money, I'm not the guy, right? But like if you're looking for money and I think I can help grow your company and be additive and I'm excited and I understand it, okay, now we're going to talk. But that's me personally. But like, yeah, you don't want to go outside of what you literally know, see, touch, feel, can do. Like, and, people like, I get, 18-year-olds all the time, like, hey, what do you think about Bitcoin? You know what I tell them? I don't know. Yeah. I don't friggin' know. They're like, hey, should I invest in this? I'm like, I don't know. Yeah. Like, everyone thinks they should know everything. Like, you don't, like, let's be honest. Like, do you really know? Like, you need to, they're like, I saw on TikTok, this guy made, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, first off, like, how much did he lose yesterday? But let's say it is true. I'm telling you, like, these people pour their lives into it, and they know it inside and out. They don't watch 3 TikToks, well, maybe they do, but those are the people that lose, right? Yeah. Like, you're going to be a loser unless you become an expert and pour your life into that. Yeah. And that's what people don't want to do. And on the, that VC route, like, we talk about Shark Tank, I actually did some consulting for people, and it was free consulting because I don't just if you're listening, I don't like to I'm not a consultant. I don't take people's money, but I will consult with people that I value, that share the same, kind of goals as me, and I value them as people. And these people they had a neat product. They were on Shark Tank and they won. And everyone thinks gold mine, right? Well, first off, Shark Tank, that's not the 3-minute or 5-minute segments you see, right? It's like hours on that day, plus vetting like way before. It's this huge process. And people think like, oh, I'm going to ask someone 5 questions and I'm going to have vetted this company. No, you better be in their underwear drawer. Like you better know all the intimate details about that company. And Shark Tank makes it done in a 5-minute segment, right? But I'm going to tell you, here's the thing. That shark actually never even put money in. Really? Said they never did. Yeah. Like, and so like people that are very shrewd investors are shrewd investors, right? People that are going to give you money that are additive and value, like they're smart. Like I want to know everything before I put anything in. And it's not a matter of dollars and numbers of zeros. It's that I don't want to waste money. Yeah. Like they're like, oh, well, why don't you throw $100,000 at this to see what happens? Because I don't do that. Yeah. Like I want to know, and there are people like most investors are way smarter, like real VC money and real PE money. I don't consider myself real. Like I'm a serial entrepreneur, right? Like, but those people, like they're Harvard MBAs, they're Stanford MBAs. Like this is what they do for their day job. Yeah. Right. And so like, if you're considering investing in your nephew right now, I don't think you should. Like not, and I'm going to tell you, I don't even know the situation, but I'm telling you, I'm probably right. Yeah. Yeah. Tell them to bootstrap. Yeah.
What about small business loans? I feel like, VC is one thing, but to me that also feels like, like that's what we see in movies and stuff like that. Probably what most people are looking at is small business loans. Is that would you consider that bootstrapping, or how does that fit into this?
I think the SBA is one of the best things the government's ever done. You won't hear me say many positive things about what the government does, but I do think the SBA is such an amazing tool that we have in the U.S. Very underutilized. I think the SBA is great. But what the SBA does not do is they don't give you money to pay yourself, right? They give you money for something tangible. Like, so let's say you need to buy a building, and you need this building because, you have to warehouse your stuff, right? Like, they will do it for tangible stuff. And by the way, you're going to personally guarantee against that, right? You're going to get good rates. It's going to be good. But like, there's really like, I think the SBA is terrific. But again, if you think you're going to go to the SBA and be like, well, the reason I need this money is because I need to have a paycheck for $80,000 a year, they're going to be like, sorry, no. Like, I need this money for inventory. I need this money for, and I've been in business. Here's my financials, right? So they're not obviously investors. They're loans, and they're friendlier loans than you can get elsewhere. And I think they're a great tool that entrepreneurs should look to. So, going back to earlier, we talk about franchise. Like, I don't have $300,000 to, buy whatever. Okay, well, what do you have, right? And then can we maybe get a loan against something? We were talking about the shooting range. Yeah, that would be perfect, right? Go get you're gonna have to put some money down. Put maybe 60, 80 grand down, something like that, and you get an SBA loan. And so you've got skin in the game. You're buying something tangible. They can foreclose on it, And so anyways, something like that would be great for an SBA loan. So,
Okay. So to kind of wrap it up or tie a bow in it, let's say I'm listening to this podcast, you've inspired me. I'm going to start a business, Devon. I'm going to buy a franchise. I'm going to bootstrap it. What are the first things you would say I need to do? What are those first steps?
Business plan. The reason I was comfortable with bootstrapping and the reason I was comfortable not making money was because I had a business plan, and I knew eventually it was going to turn. I was hoping it was going to be quicker than 24 months. I was hoping it was going to be more like 12 months, but I could compare it against my business plan and say, okay, this is working. It's going a little slower than I'd hoped, but it's working, right? And your business plan gives you this roadmap that allows you to comfortably bootstrap. And when you put together a business plan, and all of a sudden it's like, no, this is not working according to my business plan, then you can go, oh, maybe I was wrong. Maybe I need to cut cut bait.
You have something to look back to that you can make. Okay.
Yeah, you have to have that business plan in order to bootstrap.
Okay. Great. Sounds good.
Well, this is a lot of fun. I think I like our new format.
Yeah, this was fun. I learned a lot. So.
Yeah, and great questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hope everyone enjoyed. Thanks for joining us. And this is our new format. Also, we should say, in our new format, what we're trying to do is gain questions from our audience. So if you have a question, please email us at hello@devondickinson.com. And we'd love to have your question on the podcast, and hopefully it will help other people. And we're excited to hear from you.